and welcome to Tech Latest from Nikkei Asia, where we bring you the freshest updates from the technology sector in Asia. I'm your host, Katey Creel, and in this week's episode, we're talking to Cissy Zhou in Hong Kong about how China is ramping up its automotive industry. Welcome to the show, Cissy.
Hi, Katey. It's nice to be back.
Always nice to have you. So at Nikkei Asia, we cover China's auto sector quite closely. It's always been one of our big segments, especially electric vehicles. But EVs aren't the only area where companies like BYD, Geely are thriving. The country's automakers are also quite serious about autonomous driving and other automotive tech. Why has self-driving in particular been such an intense area of focus for these Chinese automakers?
Yes. So autonomous driving has been a very hot topic in recent years because of the breakthroughs in AI, simulation, compute, and falling sensor costs. So commercial deployment of this technology has been rapidly enabled. And when you say autonomous driving nowadays, it's actually mainly about the US-China car race, right? Because governments in both of the two countries are increasingly introducing favorable policies as the market is expected to have a 1.2 trillion US dollars. So the autonomous driving technologies are also becoming increasingly geopolitically significant as they begin to commercial operation. The U.S. Has the most commercial autonomous vehicles launches to date, but China is in the fast lane with more autonomous vehicles trials. And all the leading Chinese self-driving players are accelerating their international expansion, partially due to the fierce competition at home. And twice as many robotaxis expected to hit the road in the next decade versus the US. So a race is really underway to build the required partnerships and tech, as well as secure supply chains.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I can see where the secure supply lines is somewhere that China has quite an advantage given their strong tech manufacturing background.
Mm-hmm.
So to make tech like autonomous driving or assisted driving work, you need chips as well. It's not just cars, but silicon. So what kind of chips actually do you need, and how are they different for different kinds of automotive applications?
Yeah, in this sector, there are mainly two types of chips people are really pay attention to. One is a chip for autonomous driving, and then the other one is for intelligent cockpit. So currently, autonomous driving chips, particularly in the high-end market, so which is what we call level 3 and level 4. So level 3 means vehicles can make informed decisions for themselves, such as accelerating past a slow-moving vehicle, but they still require human override. Well, L4 means vehicles can operate in self-driving mode, and that market is dominated by Nvidia with its latest chip, Thor. But in the level 0 to level 2 market, so level 2 means the systems can provide steering and brake and acceleration support. But that market is in China is actually led by domestic players because that is something easier for Chinese companies to catch up. And the cost effectiveness is very high. I mean, compared to American rivals, because Chinese manufacturers are really good at making inexpensive products. So for those lower end cars, they would naturally opt for Chinese ones.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So in the intelligent cockpit, the market is currently dominated by Qualcomm with a market share of around 70%. So Chinese players are also stepping up efforts in catching up, and they are aiming for the low to middle market.
Which is not a bad strategy considering how big the demand for that market is from automakers serving, they're making so many cars in that kind of lower to mid range. Whereas if you're serving the high end, it might be much more competitive and much fewer customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Chinese suppliers are starting to, or they have been gaining ground in some segments, and they're also aiming higher. I mean, what is their kind of self-sufficiency rate overall? for Chinese auto chips?
So, according to an estimate by Bank of America, local brands accounted for around 9% of total automotive chip supply in China last year, but it will be around 15 to 20% this year. However, that figure could reach 50% in 5 years if in-house chips developed by automakers are included.
Wow, even this year's figure to potentially double is quite impressive.
Yes. Yeah, as we just talked about the in-house developed chips. In this area, China's NIO and XPeng have both equipped their latest models with in-house chips, with the so-called Shenji for NIO and the Turning for XPeng. But there are questions about their capacity and if those chips will be compatible with external users. In contrast, Nvidia's chips are very open-ended, which means that it is compatible with almost any type of algorithm or software. And because, it's expected that this NIO and XPeng will encounter capacity issues. So currently, those two companies said that the chips are only for in-house use. And so that remains a question if external users will, buy them.
That's really interesting. Actually, we just had a story about SMIC, the biggest contract chip maker in China, saying that it's seeing demand for local auto chip makers just really surging, and its own supplies are constrained by this just rapid growth. So
yeah,
it have to be quite an active market.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to NIO and XPeng, which other automakers, or maybe they're the main ones, would you say are making the most progress localizing their chips?
So chip developers like Horizon Robotics, that's a very well-known one, and also Huawei's High Silicon and Black Sesame and Semi Drive and SiEngine, which is under Geely. They are all gaining traction. And according to our review of government documents and conversations with company executives, at least 10 emerging and established chip makers in China have identified the automotive market as their primary focus. And also, SMIC, as you mentioned, they're also benefiting from the trend. So making chips for automotive and industrial applications now accounts for around 10% of SMIC's revenue compared to less than 3% in 2020. And also China's second largest contract chip maker, Hua Hong Semiconductor, is also expanding its plant in Wuxi to make auto-grade chips. And besides those companies, more and more Chinese car makers, including BYD, GAC Group, FAW, and Great Wall, and Geely, they are all investing in chip development, manufacturing, and packaging. And beyond securing the supply chain, localizing chips can also greatly reduce the cost. So, but one question remains, which is the R&D cost could be very high. So it is for sure that developing in-house chips is not feasible for everyone due to the high cost. But for supply chain security, I think automakers, particularly the big players, they have no choice but to do it. Because you never know what kind of curbs that Trump is going to impose to China, right?
Yeah, even though there was some thawing on the Nvidia front saying, oh, now you can sell these chips, now it's okay. The concern must always be there that the access could be shut off at any time.
Yes.
Given those geopolitical implications, how is the Chinese government backing up these chip localization efforts?
More than 10 years ago, China established its National Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, which is commonly known as the Big Fund. That was established in 2014, and that was to support key players like SMIC, Hua Hong Semiconductors, and Huawei. So it's reported that it would potentially spend up to $300 billion in the semiconductor industry. And there are also various forms of funding and tax incentives. For example, the Made in China 2025 grant plan, they also emphasizes reducing reliance on foreign technology and fostering domestic innovation. Meanwhile, China's MIIT, they would regularly meet those chip makers to evaluate the self-sufficiency rate. And the ministry is, of course, encouraging automakers to use more homegrown chips. But companies themselves, which is very interesting, so they are keeping a very low profile. I personally think that is in an effort to avoid being targeted by the US. So, for example, TSMC manufactures chips for a lot of those Chinese companies, but those Chinese companies wouldn't openly say it. And companies like Horizon, they would try to avoid being compared to Nvidia, because the company repeatedly told me that, we're just a startup and we want to focus on our own development, and please don't compare us to Nvidia. But in fact, in the level 0 to level 2 market, they are the biggest player in the Chinese market. Last year, I think their market share is around 37%.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
The number one player, But that's only in the relatively lower end.
Yeah. So I can see why they would want to keep a low profile. It sometimes doesn't pay to be in the spotlight. Yeah. Speaking of driving and driving yourself, you just got your driver's license, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Have you taken any of these newer cars for a test drive?
So my driver's license is I can only use that in Hong Kong at this moment. Again, next year I can use that in mainland China. However, I do have experience in observing those Chinese autonomous vehicles. So I've sometimes when I visit families in mainland, I would be in my friend's car. So their cars are all like Chinese brands and they're EV. And then so I've seen them, they often use the assisted driving features when driving on the highway. So it's amazing that actually the speed and the overtaking are both very smooth, even on the highway. And the cars nowadays in China, so they can most of the EVs, they can even park themselves and pull out of parking spaces and they can pull out of parking spaces very accurately by themselves. And inside the car, which is, you can see the feature of intelligent cockpit. That's also quite amazing. So you can you can use voice commands to automatically adjust the temperature, and also you can open the windows and change the seat position. And you can even play specific movies inside the car. So these features have been, they have become quite standard in Chinese EVs nowadays.
That's amazing. And the voice control works well?
It is, yeah.
Wow. Looking forward to trying that myself. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you should try. You should try next time when you travel to China.
Thanks so much, Cissy. It's been a really great episode. Really good to talk.
Thank you, Katey.
That's all for this week's episode. For more of Nikkei Asia's tech coverage, visit asia.nikkei.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly Tech Asia newsletter, which will be delivered to your inbox every Thursday. Thanks again for listening, and check back with us next week for more updates on the tech trends that matter.